Warning: surprisingly enough, this video contains my opinion. Shocking, I know. If you can't respect that fact, then you can go yourself. Pokken Tournament, the love child from the Pokemon Company and Bandai Namco, the developers of the Tekken franchise. The game we wanted for almost the last 2 decades where you can actually fight with your favorite Pokemon in a fighting game? How can they fuck that up?
Show me what you can do.
For the purpose of this review, I'll be reviewing it based on the console release. You know, the game that they asked us $60 for. Yeah, it's going to be one of those reviews. I'm the type of person who's going to be completely honest with you guys and have no interest in trying to make a company or any persons feel good. I feel that's not the correct way to do a review. If you're going to review something, you need to be completely honest about it and not try to sugarcoat anything for anyone. I'm also going to disregard any company politics or other reasons as for why any kind of content was cut from the game or the reason why the game was released the way it was. I don't care about any of that. Like I said, they asked us $60 for the game, which is the full price of any other AAA game that you can buy. Meaning that, yeah, it is the full price of any normal game you'll buy today that's being made by any AAA studio. I'll be covering this game as a Pokemon fan because let's face it, this is a Pokemon game, even though it's a fighting game, but I see it as a Pokemon game first. So I'll be reviewing it as both a casual and competitive player of the Pokemon series. Um, any other standards that the games are known for, like basically what Pokemon is known for, I'll be reviewing based on that as well, and any kind of standards that both the developers and companies are known for. So with that in mind, let's get this review on the way. Pokken Tournament was teased a few years back during the time of Pokemon X and Y's development. It recently came out that Pokken Tournament was supposed to run on a slightly modified version of the same engine that Tekken runs on. Which version of Tekken is unknown. I assume Tekken 6 because this game doesn't have any tag team features in it. But this was something that I've always thought would have happened because if I were to want to make a Pokemon game, it would have been on an engine similar to Tekken, since Tekken is a fighting game that I spend a lot of my time playing. But the developers scrapped that idea because they felt that it wasn't very Pokemon-like, and they wanted to push resources into building a new engine from the ground up. This engine will let you be able to fight your Pokemon in both a 2D and 3D style that is supposed to resemble the anime. And it works. The fighting style that they did chose for this game feels very Pokemon-like, and I like that. The 2D and 3D fighting in Pokken Tournament are called phases. In Field Phase, your Pokemon runs around a 3D environment using projectiles to damage the opponent, avoid attacks, or rush in to attack the opponent. While in Duel Phase, the camera shifts to the side view, showing the battle like it would be in a 2D fighter, and you play it like you would in, say, Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. Depending on the phase, your Pokemon has access to different attacks, giving you many options to play. Depending on your level of skill, you may have issues remembering on what does what in what phase because you may lose track of them. Because of this, some players may feel overwhelmed, but after a few hours of playing, you'll become more knowledgeable of the game's mechanics. I'm not completely sure how phase changes work, but from what I can tell, Doing a grab will change the phase, landing a certain attack will also change the phase, and causing certain amounts of damage will change the phase as well. With this, it seems like the game will decide when the phase change will happen, but it's done in a way to where the players can actually plan for it, so it's fairly consistent. This mechanic, when in dual phase, also acts as a way to break combos. If you build up a large amount of damage and you hit the opponent trying to do your biggest combo, the phase will shift at some point during that combo, forcing you to completely drop it. The roster of Pokemon in this game feel like how you would expect a Pokemon to play as, except for the Pikachu, but I'll save that for another topic. Each other Pokemon acts like how you would expect them to, from the playfulness of Weavile to the muscling Hulk that is Machamp, and the ever so graceful Gardevoir. Each Pokemon, including the Pikachu, bring personality to the game, which is always a treat. It even makes it better when you get to see their win and loss animations. You also have access to a support system where you can call on other Pokemon to support you in a battle. These Pokemon do things from causing heavy damage, buffing your Pokemon, debuffing the opponent, and sometimes a combination of these things. I do have some criticism of how they handle the support roster, but the Pokemon do add to the battles and they can even make or break a matchup. One thing to take note of here is that a support Pokemon cannot take a victory in a match. If a support Pokemon does hit your opponent and their HP would be reduced to 0, their HP isn't reduced to 0, but it is reduced to 1. This here is actually a really good touch to add to the battle because a support Pokemon will not knock out your opponent, forcing you as a player to find a way to land that last hit. With that said, let's get to the meat of this review. The good. The game does a few things right, and by a few, I really mean a few. The character models for the fighters look great. I really love the feel that these Pokemon have to them, and as an artist, I can really appreciate it. They don't ever cross that line of being hyper realistic. I think the best way to describe it is, go to DeviantArt and type in realistic Pokemon and see the ones that they come up with. And you see how crude and ugly they look. The Pokemon in Pokken Tournament don't ever cross that line. They look good while still being true to the actual designs of the Pokemon. And as an artist, I can appreciate that. So I'm glad to actually see that they managed to get that right. The music here is also really good. My favorite tracks from the game has to be from Blue Dome and the Old Farum Town, the winter version of it. The music really adds to the battles and makes it feel lively. That's the one thing that I really do like about the music from this game. I also really enjoy the Tekken Easter eggs that are in Pokken Tournament. With that, we get 2 stages coming right out of Tekken, and we also get a cameo from Mokujin. Mokujin can be seen on the training stages, though he's pretty lifeless. As for the stages for Tekken Tag Tournament 2, we get Bountiful Sea in the form of Magikarp Festival, and from Tekken 7 we get Dragon's Nest, a stage coming right out of a brand new Tekken game. So I'm also really glad to see that the developers are putting a little touch of what they're known for in a Pokken Tournament as well. And if you are a fan of the Tekken series, then you'll be really glad to see these Easter eggs. This game also has a very deep training mode. It gives you access to combo training for each of your Pokemon. Doing combo training for Suicune, for example, will yield you completely different results if you were to do combo training for Charizard. These trainings are specific to the character, so if you really want to learn the game, then the training mode is for you. This mode goes over specific mechanics that can help you out in battle, such as cancels, which are very effective in this game. This game's training mode has to be in the top 5 best training modes for any game. And I'm talking right up there with Skullgirls and Killer Instinct. Even if you are good at the game, I recommend that you just go through the training mode anyway. It takes about 20-30 minutes of your time, and you could probably learn some things or two that you didn't already know about the game. Trust me, it's that good. I really can't say enough about the Pokemon here. The developers stayed true to the Pokemon. You can see that they at least read the Pokédex, which is giving them some credit, considering that they had no idea how to really portray any of the Pokemon in this game. Take from that what you will, but it's nice to see Machamp throwing down 1,000 punches on someone. The online mode is decent to say the least. The netcode is okay at best. I do have my issues with it, and I wish I recorded some of the games where the game just lagged out. It seems for me that I have bad experience at trying to record games. While trying to record footage for this video, I recorded say about an hour and a half of footage, and none of it saved. So I just don't have anything that I can show as far as lag goes. But as I play through the game, you'll see it come up because I'm going to be playing this game for a while. The game finds matches very quickly. The game gives you about 10 seconds to find an opponent before it puts you in a match versus a computer. And in my experience of playing, even if the game did go into the 10 seconds to find me an opponent and put me up against a CPU, it found an opponent almost immediately afterwards. So the matchmaking for this game is really good. I hear it's better than the matchmaking in Killer Instinct, which is actually saying a lot. I don't really care for the fact that they put you up against a computer, and I was really hoping that they did something similar to the lobby in Tekken Tag Tournament 2, where when you're trying to find a match with an opponent, it lets you fight against a CPU character, or dummy if you will, until the game found a match. It would have been really cool had that CPU dummy been Mokujin, but what can you do? The game is also very colorful, which is something you don't really see in fighting games today. Most fighting games tend to be very dull and gray. I'm really picking on Mortal Kombat X here, but the colorfulness of this game is really something you would expect to find in a Pokemon game. So I'm glad to see that the world is like a world and not just a fighting game arena. This game doesn't really feel like a fighting game either. It feels more like a community. In this game, you're in the region of Farum, just like Kanto or Johto. You really feel that when you play the game. You get that sense of belonging, that you are actually a part of a world. It's not simply a fighting game. It's a Pokemon game, and it should be treated as such. So I'm glad to see that all the locations in this world actually do come together. If this world here, or this region I should say, acted like any other region in the game, you could go from location to location, do what you do, and still have that sense of Pokemon. You know, we have to remember, all Pokemon fight after all. So it's really nice to see that this region here actually brings that out in like full 3D glory. I'm glad to see it. Not that I have much to say about the voice acting, but the voice acting on a Pokemon is really good. And it's because the Pokemon Company International didn't pay anybody to redub the Pokemon, which is a godsend if you ask me. So they let the Pokemon keep their Japanese voice actors, which is great. Because let's all face it, we all know if an American tried to do it, they would have fucked it up. And I mean, you guys played the game. You've heard the voice acting. Imagine that voice acting on a Pokemon. I'm glad they didn't touch it. The bad. Oh boy, there's a lot of bad here. The graphics and background animations are horrendous. The things in the foreground look very good, but that's because they are close to the field of action. But if anything is barely in the background, it looks really bad. Considering the world building that they were trying to do here, this just doesn't come off good by me. The arcade version of this game looks great, but the port I just feel wasn't handled very well graphically. For example, people and Pokemon in the background do this bouncy thing where they move up and down, stretch really awkwardly, slide side to side, or just like move around in circles. It just looks really bad. At times, the characters are floaty, and if you played the game, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, it gets to the point to where it's really distracting to look at. And for a person like me who likes looking at the backgrounds, considering the type of world they were trying to build here, it just it just looks bad to me. On top of that, a lot of them look like paper cutouts as well. Now, this isn't a bad thing because you obviously don't want to dedicate system resources to objects very far in the background. So having other 3D meshes that you have to render just isn't that good. So of course you want to use a cardboard cutout, I should say, to look like it. But things in the foreground have this exact same thing too, and they shouldn't be there. Like I said, I understand when you want to save system resources, but that was just poorly handled. Like, we have a few 3D models in the foreground, and they're just as bad. A lot of them are pretty static, where the characters are just moving their head from side to side, or they're doing this floaty thing, or they're act like they're on a path that's just moving around in circles, and the 3D model is just following it. I just, I don't know what happened here. I really don't. Put this into perspective. Tekken Tag 2 is a 5-year-old game that is on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Keep in mind that the Wii U is more powerful than the PlayStation 3 graphically speaking. And the PlayStation 3 didn't have these issues. If you look at the Wii U version of TTT2, because it is a port, you won't see the same issues that Pokken Tournament has. In Tekken Tag Tournament 2, the backgrounds are nice to look at. Character models are fully animated. For the Wii U, they did have to remove some of those character models and replace them with the same cardboard cutouts. But they are still just as animated as the 3D models and are nice to look at. The Wii U version of Tekken Tag Tournament 2 looks great. Yes, the game does have some performance issues here and there, but the stages load fine, the textures load fine, the characters look great, the background objects look great, all the animals and people are fully animated. You know, nothing in this game looks bad. It's a good port. In Pokken Tournament, graphics have this weird artifacting around them. It's not too bad, like in terms of having a bad video card in your computer, but a lot of things look really pixelated. Graphics that should have been defringed aren't. If you look at some of the background graphics, you can see the white around the object that looks like they just took a magic wand tool in Photoshop, selected the white and hit the delete button. A lot of the textures look like they were low res but upscaled for this game. I mean, the best example that I have for this would be Batman Arkham Knight for the PC. You guys remember the controversy that was around that game, how graphics would just wash in and out, just didn't look good. That's how Pokken Tournament looks in terms of, you know, its background graphics, and it just looks really bad to me. Now, I'm basing this on a game that's 5 years old, made by the same developer, and I honestly don't understand what happened here with the graphics. Like, I can't help but think more could have been done here. It really comes across as lazy to me. Pokken Tournament is an HD game, and it does look good in the areas where it needs to look good. But Super Smash Bros. For the Wii, for example, looks a lot better than this game. And that's not good to say, considering the Wii U is much better hardware. The lighting in this game is also really good, but it pretty much only looks good on Suicune. And that's because of the ice crystal on his head. I enjoy looking at that. The lighting in the game in general is okay at best, but when special effects shine where you get all of the light coming from the graphic itself, you kind of see where graphics were cut off. Like, it doesn't look smooth, it doesn't look polished to me. Now, keep in mind that I can record at 1080p, and I have a full 1080p TV with really good color depth. So it's not my hardware, it's just that the game looks like this. The game isn't anywhere close in terms of visuals like the arcade version of this game is. And I really feel if Pokken Tournament was put on much more powerful hardware, like the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, or even the high-end PC computers, we wouldn't be having these problems, or at least I wouldn't be having these problems with the game. Now, I've never been the one to say graphics are what make a game, because they're not. But when I look at this game, I see things that look good. You know, the character models for Pokemon look really good, but sometimes, like, the low texture that some of the characters have just look really bad. Like Garchomp in this game looks really bad. His textures would have looked a whole lot better on an arcade version because it was more powerful. Here, it looks like somebody took a noise filter and just dropped it on a texture and said, here we go. That's Garchomp's texture. And it just doesn't look good to me. Now, the game still looks good. The game is still colorful. The game is pretty to look at. But it's just these things, especially the bounciness that everything in the background has. It just kind of makes it feel like I'm not in the world that they want me to be in, that I am playing a game. Uh, I don't know if you guys watch Rick and Morty, but Rick said something along the lines of, "Sorry, Jerry, that the best day of your life was a simulation running at minimal capacity." He said that. And that's what I feel like here. It feels like I'm in a world that's working at its bare minimum. The character models look great. The animations look great. The character voices look great. You know, everything that needs to be good looks really good. Everything that needs to be good feels good. It's solid. But when you start looking at the background and you see characters just moving their heads back and forth, they're extra bouncy, they're swaying side to side, not moving. When you see stuff like that, it just takes you out of it, and I can't get down with that. I don't know if you guys feel the same way about me as that, but that's kind of a big deal for me because it really does feel like I'm in a simulation running at minimum capacity. The voice acting, oh my god, I have no idea what happened here. It's like they didn't try to find anyone that was good. It's like they just walked up to some random guy at the office and said, hey, we need you to voice act a character. You just don't do that. Travis has to be the worst offender here. Just take a listen.
So you're the rising star, are you? This is your first blue ocean test. But you don't look all that worried. If you can defeat me, I'll let you move up into C rank.
This is normally a problem when English dubs when games happen. The English voice actors sound like they just didn't care, and it really hurts the game. With Nia and the voice acting in general, I just want to turn voices off altogether. It was mostly Nia and how she just would never shut up. Even when I had her turned off, she would still talk way too much. So I just got tired of it, turned voices off completely. Luckily, when you turn off the voices, the Pokemon voice acting doesn't get turned off along with it. So if you ever decide you want to go completely voiceless, there is at least a plus to that. The offline content just isn't here. Pokken Tournament is very bare bones when it comes to single player content. All you get is a league mode as a real offline game mode. Sure, you get training, but that's expected, as is local play, but I feel like more could have been done here. There is no reason why the game couldn't have a traditional fight 7 trainers plus a boss at the end with a trainer's story at the end of the entire ladder. You know, something like a normal fighting game. All the Pokemon in the game, well, I don't know if all of them do, but a lot of the Pokemon in the game have trainers actually tied to them. We've seen people like Travis who uses Garchomp and Nia who has a Weavile. It would have been really cool to have a traditional ladder type game mode where we could put one of these trainers and their Pokemon, fight through a bunch of people, fight Shadow Mewtwo at the end as a boss, get trainer story, rinse and repeat for the yellow characters. That would have been good. MKX had a ton of game modes. And even if we look at last gen, which is PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, MK9 also had a ton of modes. There were a lot of things you could do offline if you didn't want to get your ass beat online all the time. One thing I need to say is the competitive scene for games is very small compared to its casual players. Something for like every 100 players, you have 100 casual players. And the casual players really don't care about online ranking at all. So to leave out the single player content when the vast majority of Pokemon players are casuals alienates the players because they want to unlock stuff and play different game modes. League mode could have been an extra mode, and when you finish the league, you get options to play extra events as the game calls it, which to me feels like extra padding because the developers knew that the game was short on content. The story here, and I use the term story lightly, all you do is fight randomly generated trainers in a Pokemon League, where your goal is to make it to at least rank 8 so that way you can fight in a tournament, and then once you finish the tournament, you fight the League Master so you can rank up. If you ever lose one match, it will set you back a lot. I lost one match in the A League and ended up rank 9, which meant I had to fight another set of trainers before I can even get to the tournament. Now keep in mind that each set of trainers you fight is 5 trainers. So if you are a player who aren't completely competent at fighting games, you could be here for a very long time, especially at the higher ranks. So losing is extremely punishing. You have Green League, Blue League, Red League, Chroma League, and Iron League, which you get for beating Shadow Mewtwo, which also unlocks a costume for Nia. From time to time, you'll get interrupted by Shadow Mewtwo fight, in which you have to fight Shadow Mewtwo. The game plays the cutscene for Shadow Mewtwo several times, so you don't ever get to see any new content. Basically, what you saw a year before the game released is what the game shows you over and over again. So that could have been done a little bit better, but it's no big deal, I guess. I do like how you can win the fight. I thought at first the Shadow Mewtwo fight was something you had to lose to a bunch of times before the game dropped the computer's AI so you can actually beat them. But I've seen people beat Shadow Mewtwo their first time. So it's nice to know that you can beat the computer the first time around. The AI is hard. It's not really a story, but it's more of exposition. You get a bunch of fights and you fight Shadow Mewtwo. Sometimes a trainer may say something to you, but it's not really story. It's just something to break up the monotonous from time to time. For the whole league, there's about 100 total battles you have to go through. Keep in mind, I only lost twice. That was once in Red League and Chroma League. So I had about 100 battles. If you lose multiple times, you can easily have 120, 100, just some number over 120 in terms of battles. I don't know how true that is because, like I said, I don't lose often when doing the offline content. But for a person who might not be good at fighting games, they may be here a lot longer than they would have liked to. With League, you can sometimes fight the same Pokemon over and over. And in some occasions, you may see the same Pokemon 2 or 3 times in the same 5 battle set. I had a set in which there were 3 Weaviles, and this kills the suspension of disbelief. In this region, other Pokemon exist and they are around. There's no secret that I want Pidgeot to be in this game. And there are a bunch of Pidgey in this game. You see, there's a Pidgey right there. There's one on Zangish's head too. But I don't have the option to play as Pidgeot. It's clear that Pidgeot exists in this region, but no trainer has one. Every trainer just uses the same 14 Pokemon. And yes, I mean 14, because no trainer uses Mewtwo or Shadow Mewtwo in the league. You see the issue here, right? It kills that vibe of it being a region. Yes, I know this is a fighting game and content has to be made for it, but I see no reason to have Pokemon in just as background decoration. It almost would have been better if they just made this game as a fighting game and didn't try to do any kind of world building. No lore or anything. And if you are a casual fan who thought this game would have a ton of Pokemon in it, then you will be severely disappointed. If you think none of this matters and that fighting games should only cater to the competitive, then you are part of the problem with games being made today. The competitive community is a very vocal minority that think all fighting games should exist for them, and that isn't true. Just because they don't play the offline game modes that the larger casual uh, base does, doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in the game. This is the problem with Street Fighter V and why it only made 10% of its projected sales. And that's because the casual players, which is a huge part of the market by the way, had nothing in the game that they can do. Sure, Pokken Tournament isn't as bare bones as Street Fighter V, but it's really lacking in content and it's pretty bare for what a Pokemon game should have had in it. Now for the online mode. The online battle modes are pretty bare as well. You pretty much only have online ranked and unranked if you don't want to risk your rank while trying to learn a new Pokemon, as well as a mode where you can play against friends. But the game doesn't support a spectator mode, and it doesn't have a system in which you can lobby with other players so you can maybe get matches or just sit and chat. Tekken Tag Tournament 2 had this. The game also would have been nice if it had something like a King of the Hill mode where players can just fight for the top spot and rotate between those who lose. The online rank mode is great and it functions like how you would expect it to function in a game, but I do feel that there should have been at least more online casual game modes. For how online plays, the game plays really well, but you also have Pokemon that only do well online. And these Pokemon tend to be Pikachu, Mewtwo, and other really fast characters. The online game mode is pretty good, but there can be issues with lag. And when you do have lag, it's really bad in this game. The lag that I've experienced in this game hasn't been like it's ever been on any other fighter. That's mostly because of how Pokemon play in this game. They play like no other fighting game character would. So when you have lag, you really feel like you're losing to something that you really couldn't control. Online is great, don't get me wrong, but I just wish that there were at least more things you can do with it. One other thing that I wish you could do online for at least ranked would be if it would let you choose your support set before a battle actually happened. The way it is now is you have to choose a support set and you use that support set throughout the duration of your online matches. They give you 3 sets to choose from, so it would have been nice if after I saw which Pokemon my opponent was using, it would let me choose a support set to use for that battle. But that's not something that the game allows. Maybe that's something they can change later. This isn't really something that's bad per se, but it would be nice if they gave you the option to have more options to deal with certain characters that you might come across. One of the biggest things that hurts this game is its unlockable content. In fighting games, we love to unlock things such as characters. However, in Pokken tournaments, you can't do that. The game comes with all the characters unlocked and ready to use. The developers give you a Shadow Mewtwo amiibo card, which unlocks Shadow Mewtwo. The intention here was good, so it can make the game tournament ready, but I really do feel that they fucked it up because the game doesn't give you regular Mewtwo to use as well. The intention was good, but I feel like they could have done it better. If the Shadow Amiibo card unlocked both Mewtwo and Shadow Mewtwo, then there'll be no complaint here because, well, the game is supposed to be tournament ready, so they give you the option to unlock the characters. If they want the game to be truly tournament ready, then why not just have Mewtwo and Shadow Mewtwo already on the roster? It's not like we didn't already know he was going to be there. Also, the Shadow Mewtwo card doesn't unlock Shadow Mewtwo permanently. It unlocks him until you turn the game off. When you turn it back on, he's no longer on the roster, and you will have to scan the card again if you want to use him. Alternatively, you could just finish the league and just unlock him permanently. As for the unlockables, you can unlock stages, support Pokemon, with the majority of the time spent unlocking trainer titles and items to customize your trainer avatar. That's it. You don't unlock any other Pokemon other than Mewtwo and Shadow Mewtwo, which is quite sad. I don't know about you, but I don't like it that my only real unlocks in this game are things that I can care about. I really don't care to unlock trainer titles. I really don't care to unlock accessories for my avatar. These aren't the things that I play fighting games for. Yes, I'm glad they give you an option to customize your trainer so you don't look like everyone else, but it really does feel like I spend the rest of my time just unlocking useless content. Going into custom trainer avatars, I feel like more could have been done. Your only option of a character model is a child, which is odd considering this game was made for older Pokemon fans. It would have been nice if you could choose your age group and then go from there. I would like the option to actually be a black guy over being a white guy in blackface. The options you have here at your disposal are quite varied in terms of how you customize the character, though I wish they at least gave me the option to choose my model type. you knew this was going to happen. I'm going to rip this game a new asshole when it comes to this. The roster is uninspired and just not Pokemon at all. All of the Pokemon, with the exception of Suicune and Chandelure, are humanoids and act really human-like, which I don't like. The developers gave huge priority to things that walk on two legs and has two arms. You know, the standard punching and kicking. The Pokemon I felt should be here aren't. And if we were to remove the obvious shoehorned in Pokemon, we're only left with only 10 spots on the roster. The game only has 14 species of Pokemon in it, out of the 721 currently known Pokemon, which is entirely way too little for a Pokemon game. I felt something between 28 and 32 would have been a great number and would have given the casual fan something to mess around with and hit a few common fan favorites as well while making it feel more Pokemon like. I know most people think 16 is good enough since it balances the game. It's not good and the game isn't balanced. Out of the 16 Pokemon in the game, the developers saw the need to give you two Pikachu and two Mewtwo. To make matters worse, the characters play nothing like one another, which means they spent resources to make the same Pokemon different rather than making two different Pokemon. Palucha, who is a luchador Pokemon, would have been more appropriate than a Pikachu playing dress up as a luchador. And keep in mind that the people who wanted Hawlucha in the game really don't even like the Pokemon to begin with, but even they are calling bullshit on that. Now, I will say that not all Pokemon can be in the game, but what we got versus what we could have had is a huge miss here. We are in a world where other Pokemon exist, and no one entered with a Zangoose who clearly has an owner. The reason I want a large roster is so we can have some roster diversity because I already knew the shoehorn Pokemon were going to take up a lot of slots, in this case 6. So having more Pokemon would mean more favorites could make it in. Now, I can accept that 16 would be a decent number of Pokemon in the game if the roster looked like this. You know, diverse and Pokemon like. Instead, we've got a bunch of humanoid Pokemon and two oddballs. Pokemon like Suicune got my hopes up for the future of this game. It was a Pokemon no one expected to make it in, so it opened up the doors to other Pokemon species, but we never got that. Chandelure was the last reveal that wasn't essentially human. This was when we knew the final roster of the game and what it would be. I wanted at least one bird Pokemon, at least one serpent Pokemon, maybe a fish or something, so it feels more Pokemon-like, but we never got that. All we got was a Tekken Street Fighter game with Pokemon skinned on it. I'm not saying that Pidgeot being in the game would have made it the best game ever, because it still would have its issues, but I would enjoy to be able to play it more. On top of that, there isn't even a playable evolution, which is arguably the most popular group of Pokemon in the game next to the starter and legendary group of Pokemon. The roster here is so poorly handled that I can't even call it a Pokemon game. Now, I'm glad they didn't take the route of making this game exclusively fighting type Pokemon, because all Pokemon fight. But most of the fighters are bipedal humanoids in this game, which the developers said wouldn't have happened. They go through great lengths to make the Pokemon appear as human as possible. Charizard has his Charizard Pecs, which is something nobody ever, I guess, thinks about when they think of Charizard. And Braxton is clearly a gel-bait lolly, so they tried to make the Pokemon feel unique enough but I feel they focused on what role the character should play or what type of appeal they should have rather than the content itself. I'm sure people would be fine with a small roster of Pokemon if that roster was varied and interesting, but it does none of that. Sure, we have some interesting choices like Chandelure and even Gengar, but the rest of the roster just comes across as cookie cutter, non interesting Pokemon that are only here to fill some type of role that the developers feel the game needs to have. One of the arguments people use for Pokken Tournament having such a small roster is that it would balance the game. Well, the game isn't really balanced. Both Pikachu and Mewtwo are arguably the most broken Pokemon in the game, while others are far too strong because they fit into some group that shouldn't apply to Pokemon. Because of this, some Pokemon feel completely overpowered and others underpowered. Take Suicune for example. The character is a zoner who wants to attack from a distance, but while in field phase against a competent player, you'll never be able to hit them with any of Suicune's attack simply because they can run around your attacks or use the counter attack dash cancel to absorb your attack and move in closer to you, while you can't do the same to them. Pokemon like Machamp are really strong because they assume he has to be, just because of how heavyset characters work and act in other fighting games. For the most part, it works in this game, but the game really feels artificially balanced, and you honestly can't call that balance. Synergy mechanics are completely broken. When a Pokemon is in their synergy, they gain armor to all light attacks. It's not like a single hit of armor where if you hit them once, the armor breaks and then you can hit them with light attacks. No, they gain armor against all light attacks. Some Pokemon like Suicune are useless because two methods of its attack are absorbed by the armor, forcing you to use Suicune's slow heavy attacks, which can be baited out and punished. And really the only other way to hit a synergy Pokemon is to grab it. Some Pokemon also get synergy way too fast, and this is really the thing that puts both the Pikachu over the top to me. Simply because Pikachu is quick, powerful, has access to really good moves and projectiles, and can synergy burst twice, which means Pikachu can gain back a total of about 120 health, and have access to 2 burst attacks per round, which is extremely dangerous. If Pikachu didn't have synergy burst this quickly, then Pikachu would be more of a balanced character. I would still think the character would need to take some nerfs because Pikachu is still a very stupid Pokemon without synergy. But Pikachu has access to very good tools as well as having access to synergy burst twice per match. Charizard, on the other hand, when you enter synergy with that thing, you essentially become a sitting duck because you can't do anything. You eat a burst attack for over 250 damage. Considering Charizard is a power type character, you really don't want to be taking hits anyway. Charizard can do many different things when in Synergy Burst. Charizard can use its burst attack from the ground and the air, so you really don't have any defensive options against the character. So if you decide you want to jump to avoid attack, you eat a burst attack. If you decide you want to press a button because you think it's safe to do so, you eat a burst attack. If you try to call support mon to get Charizard off of you, you eat a burst attack. If you try to burst attack Charizard, he can counter burst attack you and you eat a burst attack. If you try to block Charizard and wait out the synergy, he simply grabs you, which does about 180, and that grab also chains into his burst attack, which means you can eat a total of almost 400 damage. This is completely absurd. Synergy at times often comes across as a tool that's way too safe because of the advantages that you gain. Even if a Pokemon decides they want to remain defensive against you, as long as you're in synergy mode, you gain HP back rapidly. So if your opponent doesn't do anything, you're gaining health. And that's way too punishing considering how overpowered the burst mechanics are in this game. On top of that, the Pokemon also gains a buff to all of their stats, including movement speeds. So they become a force to be reckoned with. Now, not all Pokemon in their Synergy Burst are stupid, but a lot of them are, and it really ruins the game for me. I feel if burst attacks had some kind of starting lag so that it wasn't as safe, then it'll be a little bit better because if your opponent wants to throw out a burst attack, you can properly defend against it. And I feel that Synergy Burst in general shouldn't have armor to all light attacks. Maybe give it armor against one light attack so that way you have that option, but they shouldn't have armor against all light attacks because it makes some methods of attacks completely useless with some characters. Another thing is the counter attack. I, for one, am glad that Pokken Tournament isn't as technical as some fighters, but this mechanic is just stupid. When a Pokemon attacks you, pressing X and A together lets you do a counterattack, which gives you armor against the entire attack the opponent is using on you, and lets you hit them back. I feel this shouldn't be here, or at least as it is. This should really cost some kind of resource, and I feel it should take about 25 to 33% of the synergy bar considering how good it is. This would also make the attack function like an EX attack would in any other fighting game. Since most fighting games that have an EX bar usually gives you between 3 to 4 times to use it, I feel having it absorb 25 to 33% of the bar every time you use it should really be a fair trade-off. This would also be consumed when doing a CADC as well. Also, if you think you're safe to attack because your opponent did something unsafe, your opponent can simply counterattack you out of their move, depending on the character, and you could eat a full combo. Characters like Pikachu Libre, who has a counterattack that goes into a full combo that ends in a grab. This is so spammable online because of the game's decent at best netcode, and at times you can't even react to it. Some Pokemon, such as Zoners, like I said earlier, are ruined by this mechanic because you can simply counterattack, dash cancel the attack, absorb the attack, armor through the projectile, and move towards your opponent, making their move sets feel almost useless. This game rewards you for playing hyper offensive characters like Mewtwo or Pikachu. As if it wasn't enough, the game rewards you for playing bad. Because this game isn't as technical and gives all players mercy with rank data, bad characters are often rewarded for playing bad, while the player who played well gets beat or comes close to it because the game's mechanic awards casual playstyles. Both Pikachu and Mewtwo offer very high reward for little risk to the point to where they just aren't fun to play against. They also carry players alone just because of how good the character is. Mewtwo, both of them are brain dead characters. Their attacks have huge aerial effects to where you can't punish them correctly because you'll get hit by something. His attacks hit you from everywhere on the screen, and if you do something like jump or trying to attack from the air because Mewtwo creates this huge tornado of bullshit that makes whatever he does safe. He has options for everything. This simply isn't balanced. For the most part, most of the cast is fairly balanced around each other, assuming you remove both Pikachu and Mewtwo from the cast. There are some matches that are pretty much an auto loss, like Suicune versus Gardevoir, with the matchup being like 70-80% in Gardevoir's favor, or Machamp against any zoner. But I never really had a problem with a matchup that couldn't be solved by at least knowing how to fight against that Pokemon. So they did a good job there. But both Pikachu and Mewtwo completely throw the game balance out of whack because they offer so much for little effort. Whereas the rest of the cast, you have to be somewhat competent to play the character. This can be fixed through patches, but it's pretty much agreed by the masses that they are considered the best characters in the game. At times, the game mechanics feel like they are against you. Very often, the game shifts momentum way too much, creating times where you're in a winning situation, and because your opponent did something you really didn't account for, you could possibly lose that round. An example, I was fighting against a Charizard, and I was punishing all of my opponent's attempts to try to get in against me. Whenever my opponent jumped in the air, I would anti-air him. Whenever my opponent tried to do anything on the ground, I would zone him out with Aurora Beams with Suicune. And if my opponent tried to get a little happy with the counter attack, I'd space it and then combo punish him. But he did one move, which my move didn't space properly. He hit me once, got me into the corner, and I ended up losing 500 health just in that one situation. So a lot of the times we have situations in the game where this happens. I really do feel that the counterattack is to blame for this, since instead of having to worry about two things like you would have to worry about in most games, you kind of have a third thing to worry about here. Also, at times, you are punished for making the correct plays or reads, which isn't supposed to be the case. If I know my opponent is going to grab me and I attack them, I shouldn't be punished for making the correct read, attacking my opponent when they grab me. In this instance, they will clash, and if you don't defend against the attack, you're probably going to eat a counter attack right then and there, which isn't supposed to be the case. The same things can even be said about breaking a player's shield. The time to punish a player for breaking their shield is way too low. And from what I've seen, I don't even know a frame count on it, and I know that I'm probably going to completely like underestimate it, but it really feels like you have like a 3 to 5 frame window to punish the opponent before they can do anything back to you. Because of this, you don't feel like you're safe to make a punish, even though you did the correct thing. It really feels like you aren't rewarded for breaking your opponent's shield or putting them into a situation where you can break their shield. In games like Super Smash Bros., if you break your opponent's shield, they are down for a very long time. They don't get to recover off of that. You can pretty much do whatever you want to the opponent. And that's how I feel that it should also be in Pokken Tournament. But in Pokken Tournament, because of how casual friendly the mechanics are, you're almost in a better situation to not try to punish your opponent doing something incredibly unsafe, because you place yourself into a situation where you can potentially lose. Another thing that I really have to say something about here is the fact that you can't chip an opponent in this game at 1 health. Now, I didn't think this was going to be too much of a big deal, simply because as long as I play well at low health, I can't lose. And I really feel that it's a very punishing mechanic for the player that's winning. The reason I say this is because in other fighting games, if your opponent has very low life and you have the life lead, you have no reason to go in on an opponent and place yourself in a situation where they could bring it back. If your opponent has 1 health left of hits and you're playing a character that can zone out, you're probably in an almost better situation to always just throw projectiles at them until you chip them out for the round. This is not the case in Pokken Tournament. If your opponent has 1 health, you cannot take that hit or you cannot take that round until you physically hit the opponent when they're not blocking, or you can grab them. Support Pokemon, like I said earlier, cannot take the Pokemon's very last hit, and that's fine. But I feel that this creates a situation where you have to place yourself in a situation to where the opponent can potentially beat you, because you as the winning player has to go in on your opponent to beat them. Now, if time is running out and time is called, the player with the most health will win. But this isn't always the case. And if you're going to try to play out that timer, then your opponent can take advantage of that as well. But I really don't like the fact that me, as a player in the winning position, has to risk that position to go in and hit an opponent when they can do one thing and potentially take the round from me. I've seen a lot of people lose because of this, and this is not the way it's supposed to be played. Yes, I'm glad that you can't chip a player out because it really swings matchups in the favor of Pokemon that can zone extremely well, such as Chandelure and Gardevoir. So if you're a character like Machamp, then you really can't do much about that because they just chip you out through health and you can't do much about it. So I'm glad to see that it's here. But I really feel that it's very punishing to a player that's trying to secure the round but can't because they have to go in to get the hit. Pokken Tournament is an extremely fun game and it does what it needs to do extremely well, but many elements could have been better. Some stages look great and others look lazy, while Pokemon voice acting is very well done, but the dubbing isn't. But what do you want me to say? Is the game worth buying or isn't it? Given everything I said, well, that's up for you to decide. Pokken Tournament demands that you pay 60 bucks for the game on pretty much the Pokemon name alone, but it doesn't really feel like it's worth it. Given what we got, I say the game is worth 25 bucks, 30 tops. There's just isn't enough content here to justify the price, and you feel like you end up paying 30 bucks more just for trainer titles and avatar unlocks, as well as support Pokemon, which is what I feel in at the very least. This is a Pokemon game, and I want to have the Pokemon themselves, but we only got 14 species, which doesn't feel very Pokemon-like to me, considering how lively the world is supposed to be. You have to ask yourself this. If this wasn't a Pokemon game, and was some new IP for a fighting game that came out with this engine, would you even care about it? And I want you to be completely honest here. If you wouldn't let this game's lack of content fly for a brand new game that's asking you to buy their game and not Mortal Kombat X, Killer Instinct, or Street Fighter 5, would you buy the game as Pokken Tournament release? And if you wouldn't, then why would you give Pokemon a pass in this situation? Given what I said, it's up to you if you think the game is worth it or not. As of now, DLC isn't planned for the game, so we have to assume that the game that we bought is what we get. Is the game fun? Hell yeah it is. And I would say that you should buy it because it is a Pokemon fighting game, something we've always wanted. This is the way Pokemon is meant to be played, but if you're on the fence on whether or not you want to buy the game, then you may want to wait until some more content is released for the game. Pokken Tournament has a skill cap in the game, but it doesn't take much to get into the game, so it's not like you'll be missing out on anything if you decide you want to wait. At the very least, Street Fighter 5 is releasing with free DLC and more content to make up for its release, and that's something Pokken Tournament hasn't promised. I'm not going to give the game a score like everyone else because I fear it isn't fair to do so. And I want to make a review where I talk about the game and what it offers and let you decide if the game is worth it or not. I'm a huge Pokemon fan, so it pains me to say such terrible things about this game, but the game does deserve to exist. As more content comes out and the game balances, the game will get better, and I do hope you are all around for the future of Pokken Tournament. I hope this review gave you all something to think about, and as always, thank you for watching.